7 March 1945, 15:12 hours. Remagen, Germany. Artillery cracks across the Rhine. Concrete dust drifts from the towers of the Ludendorff Bridge as another American shell slams into the eastern bank. Smoke rolls low over the water. The river is swollen, gray, cold, moving with the quiet force of early spring thaw. Inside the western tunnel mouth, men of the U.S. 27th Armored Infantry Battalion press their backs against damp stone, helmets low, rifles tight. You can hear their breathing over the distant thunder of the 9th Armored Division's tanks grinding forward through the town. Then someone shouts, "The bridge is still up!" Across the river, German engineers scramble along the catwalks beneath the steel trusses. Wires snake toward demolition charges fixed deep inside the concrete piers. The order has already come down from higher command. Blow it. Deny the Rhine. Buy time for the Reich. A flash bursts from the eastern abutment. The bridge heaves. Steel groans like a wounded animal. A column of black smoke punches upward, swallowing the Gothic towers in soot. Chunks of masonry rain into the water. For a split second, it looks as if the entire span will fold into the current, but it doesn't. The smoke clears just enough to reveal the impossible. The central truss sags. The decking buckles, yet the Ludendorff Bridge still stands, twisted, scarred, alive. On the western bank, Brigadier General William Hoge stares through binoculars, disbelief hardening into calculation. His Combat Command B had not expected this. Intelligence insisted every crossing was destroyed. The Rhine was supposed to be an iron barrier, the last natural defense before the industrial heart of Germany. But there it is, a bridge into the Reich. German machine guns chatter from the far side. Bullets snap against stone and chew into the riverbank. An American Sherman tank lurches forward, its 75mm cannon barking toward the eastern towers. Infantry hug the walls, waiting for an order that could rewrite the war. Time fractures. On the bridge itself, German demolition officer Captain Willy Brach fumbles with a field telephone, shouting for confirmation. The main charges should have obliterated the span. 10,000 pounds of explosives, enough to hurl steel into the sky. Instead, only part of the wiring detonated. The rest failed, damaged by earlier Allied bombing. He orders a second attempt. Nothing. Across the river, the Americans see the confusion. Lieutenant Karl Timmerman turns to his platoon. He does not give a speech, he points. Forward. They break from cover at a dead sprint. Boots hammer against planks already splintered by the blast. The bridge shudders under their weight. German rifle fire rips down the length of the span, splintering wood, sparking against steel beams. Men fall, others leap over them. Halfway across, another explosion erupts from beneath the decking. A demolition charge goes off late, punching a crater through the roadway. Smoke swallows everything. For a heartbeat, you cannot see who is alive. Then figures emerge from the haze, coughing, running. The Rhine churns 50 feet below. If the bridge collapses now, every man on it will vanish into freezing current and falling steel. Engineers from the 9th Armored scramble forward carrying wire cutters. They slice through cables leading to unexploded charges bolted along the trusses. German defenders retreat toward the Erpelerle heights, firing as they go. An American soldier reaches the far bank and dives into a crater. Breath ragged, eyes wide. He looks back across the span. More men are coming. The impossible is becoming real. By 16 hours, a foothold exists on the eastern shore of the Rhine. Tanks edge cautiously onto the bridge, despite the sag in its spine. Every vibration threatens collapse. Every footstep feels like a wager against gravity. Behind them, Remagen burns. Ahead lies the Ruhr. High command on both sides struggles to comprehend what is unfolding. For the Allies, it is an opportunity beyond planning. For the Germans, it is catastrophe in slow motion. The Ludendorff Bridge was meant to die. Instead, it has opened a door. And both armies now understand the truth at the same time. Whoever holds this bridge will decide how the war ends. 7 March 1945, 16:18 hours. Eastern bank of the Rhine. Smoke clings to the steel like a living thing. The Ludendorff Bridge trembles under the weight of American boots and armored steel, every vibration echoing through its wounded frame. Splintered planks shift beneath infantrymen from the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion as they push deeper onto German soil. Behind them, the river moves with indifferent force, swollen and cold, carrying debris from the failed demolition downstream. Lieutenant Karl Timmerman crouches behind a twisted girder near the eastern anchorage. His men spread out along the embankment, firing toward the railway tunnel that cuts into the cliff face at Erpel, German Volkssturm militia, and remnants of regular Wehrmacht units per rifle and machine gun. Fire from slit windows and hastily prepared positions among the rocks. The crack of Mauser rifles snaps across the gorge. You can almost feel the fragility beneath their boots. Engineers rush past with satchels and pliers. The air smells of burnt cordite and pulverized concrete. Along the trusses, unexploded charges hang like silent threats, wired into circuits that failed only minutes earlier. A single spark could turn the bridge into a coffin. Sergeant Alexander Drabik becomes one of the first Americans to reach the far bank intact. He scrambles up the embankment, dives into a shallow ditch, and returns fire toward a German machine gun nest near the tunnel entrance. Others follow, spreading left and right, forcing defenders back by sheer aggression. German officers shout conflicting orders. Captain Willy Bracci attempts to organize resistance, his voice raw, boots slipping on shattered stone. He knows reinforcements are thin. The Rhine was supposed to be a final shield, not a contested crossing. The demolition failure has fractured more than concrete. It has fractured command cohesion. At 1640, American engineers from Company B, 9th Armored Engineer Battalion, begin cutting the remaining demolition wires. One by one, they sever cables leading to blocks of high explosive packed into the piers. The men work in full view of German riflemen on the heights. Bullets spark against steel beams inches from their hands. They do not stop. On the western bank, Brigadier General William Hogue orders tanks forward. A Sherman from the 14th Tank Battalion edges onto the span, tracks grinding against warped planking. The bridge dips perceptibly under its weight. Observers hold their breath. If the central truss fails now, the tank and its crew will plunge into the river along with dozens of infantry. The Sherman keeps moving. Its 75mm gun fires point-blank into the tunnel mouth, blasting chunks of rock and sending German defenders scrambling deeper into darkness. The concussion rolls back across the bridge like thunder trapped in steel ribs. By 17 hours, more than 100 American soldiers occupy positions east of the Rhine. They fan outward cautiously, clearing trenches and cellars. The town of Erpel becomes a maze of shattered brick and echoing gunfire. Civilians huddle in basements as firefights erupt above them. Meanwhile, German high command reacts with disbelief. Reports flood upward. The bridge still stands. American armor is crossing. Field Marshal Walter Model demands immediate countermeasures. Orders are issued to destroy the span at all costs. Artillery batteries are redirected. Luftwaffe units are alerted. The race begins. Twilight settles over the Rhine Valley, turning smoke into a low violet haze. The Americans dig in on the eastern heights, aware that holding this foothold through the night will invite everything Germany has left. Engineers continue reinforcing the bridge with hastily installed timber supports, shoring up cracked beams to sustain heavier loads. Every hammer strike echoes like a countdown. At 1830, German artillery finds the range. Shells scream down from concealed batteries east of the river. One detonates near the western tower, blasting masonry into the water. Another slams into the approach road, flipping a jeep and sending medics scrambling. Still the bridge holds. American anti-aircraft guns roll into position along the riverbank. Crews set up 50-caliber machine guns and 40mm Bofors cannons, anticipating Luftwaffe retaliation. The sky darkens fully, stars hidden behind smoke. On the bridge, traffic becomes constant. Infantry moving east, wounded moving west. Tanks inching forward in single file, their engines rumbling through the steel skeleton like a pulse. The structure groans again. Louder this time. A crack splits through part of the decking near midspan. Engineers rush forward with planks and beams, patching under fire. One misstep could send a man through into open air. Across the river, German units regroup for counterattack. Orders filter down to assemble assault teams to retake the eastern anchorage before the Americans can expand. Night closes in. Flares rise over the valley, washing the Ludendorff Bridge in harsh white light. Every silhouette becomes a target. Every movement draws fire. The foothold exists. But holding it until dawn will demand more than courage. It will demand a miracle that no one on either bank can yet see coming. 8th of March 1945, 06:42 hours. Rhine Valley, east of Remagen. Dawn arrives under a ceiling of low cloud. Frost clings to the twisted steel of the Ludendorff Bridge. The river moves beneath it, gray and patient, as if unaware that history is balanced above its current. American engineers have worked through the night, reinforcing cracked beams with timber braces and steel plates scavenged from rail stock. The bridge looks less like a triumph and more like a wounded animal forced back onto its feet. On the eastern heights near Erpel, infantrymen from Combat Command B crouch in shallow foxholes carved into frozen soil. Machine guns are sighted down narrow streets. Bazooka teams watch the ridgelines. They know what is coming. At 07:03, the first German artillery salvo lands. Shells tear into the western bank, sending plumes of earth skyward. Another round detonates near the eastern anchorage, shattering windows and spraying fragments across the bridge decking. The concussion ripples through the trusses. Dust sifts down from overhead beams like dirty snow. General William Hogue listens to the impact reports with jaw clenched. The order is simple. Expand the bridgehead, bring more men across. The risk is obvious. If the bridge collapses now, thousands will be stranded or drowned. Then the sky begins to growl. At 08:15, Luftwaffe aircraft appear through the cloud cover. Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighter bombers drop low along the river corridor, using the hills for concealment before pulling up toward the bridge. Their engines snarl, exhaust trailing like dark ribbons against pale sky. American anti-aircraft batteries open fire instantly, 50 caliber. Tracers streak upward in bright red arcs. 40mm Bofors cannons thump in rhythmic bursts. The valley fills with crossing lines of fire. One Fu-190 releases a bomb just before pulling away. The weapon tumbles toward midspan. Soldiers dive flat against the planks. The explosion detonates just short, geysering water high into the air and drenching the bridge in spray. Steel groans again but holds. A second aircraft presses lower, strafing the eastern approaches. Bullets chew into sandbags and scatter dirt across the defenders. An American gun crew tracks it calmly and fires. The fighter jerks, smoke pouring from its engine, and slams into the far hillside in a blossom of flame. The attack continues in waves. Messerschmitt Bf-109s sweep through, attempting precision drops. Each pass is met by concentrated flak. The bridge disappears periodically behind curtains of smoke and shrapnel. Yet it remains standing. By midday, the Luftwaffe's losses mount. Pilots report that the span is nearly impossible to destroy. From the air, without risking direct hits from ground fire, some bombs strike the superstructure, punching holes in the roadway and bending steel ribs, but none achieve the decisive blow. On the ground, German artillery intensifies. Heavy guns from across the Rhine seek to finish what explosives failed to accomplish. Observers adjust range methodically. One shell strikes near the central truss, snapping a diagonal brace and sending fragments spinning into the river. Engineers scramble once more, crawling out under fire to secure emergency supports. You can imagine their hands trembling, not from fear but from the awareness that every bolt matters. At 1400 hours, U.S. Army engineers begin assembling pontoon bridges downstream, anticipating the worst. Inflatable floats are pushed into the river under covering fire. The current fights them, swirling hard against anchored cables. Even if the Ludendorff collapses, the crossing must continue. Meanwhile, on the eastern heights, American infantry push outward, clearing villages and capturing stunned German soldiers who cannot believe the bridge still stands. Prisoners speak of frantic orders from Field Marshal Walter Model. Destroy it, at any cost. Late in the afternoon, a new threat emerges. Arado R-234 jet bombers streak overhead at blistering speed, their engines emitting a shrill, unfamiliar whine. The jets release bombs from high altitude, aiming by estimation rather than precision. The explosions land wide, shaking hillsides but missing the bridge itself. The Americans stare upward in disbelief. Even Germany's newest weapons are failing to bring the span down. As dusk settles, the air raids taper off. Smoke drifts low again, settling into the river valley like a tired fog. The bridge stands scarred and rattling. Sections of its roadway patched with fresh planks already stained by blood and oil. Across it now move not just infantry, but artillery pieces, trucks, even additional Shermans. The flow is constant. Each crossing strengthens the eastern foothold. Each minute alive erodes Germany's final defensive line. Night falls cold and tense. German commanders prepare something new. If bombs and shells cannot do it, then perhaps something smaller, something silent, can slip beneath the steel ribs and finish the job. The Rhine is dark now, and in its current, unseen shapes begin to move. In March 1945, 11 hours, Rhine River, below the Ludendorff Bridge. The valley is silent except for the steady rush of water against stone. Searchlights sweep lazily across the surface, their beams cutting pale corridors through drifting mist. Above, the bridge looms like a wounded cathedral of steel, patched and trembling, yet stubbornly alive. Beneath it, the Rhine is black. Shapes move with the current, German Naval Command has turned to desperation. If aircraft and artillery cannot destroy the bridge, then men will try. Specially trained combat swimmers from the Kriegsmarine slip into the river upstream, their bodies coated in grease against the cold, explosives strapped tight against their chests. They move without splashing, letting the current carry them toward the shadow of the span. You would never see them from above. On the western bank, American sentries stamp their boots against the frost, rifles slung low, eyes straining into darkness. They have been warned about saboteurs. Orders are blunt. Shoot anything in the water. At 2:26, a sentry hears something. Not a splash, a scrape. He leans over the railing and peers down between steel girders. The river reflects nothing but distorted light. For a moment he doubts himself. Then another faint sound. Metal touching stone. He raises his M1 rifle and fires into the current. The crack echoes across the valley. Other sentries join in. Tracer rounds slash downward, turning black water into churning streaks of red. The swimmers scatter. One reaches the pier and begins fixing a magnetic charge to the concrete base. Another struggles against the current, fighting to keep position beneath the span. A flare bursts overhead, flooding the river with harsh white light. The swimmers are exposed. Machine guns open from both banks. Bullets punch into water, throwing up violent splashes. One German diver disappears beneath the surface, blood blooming briefly before the current sweeps it away. Another attempts to dive deeper, but the explosives strapped to his body drag him awkwardly. He vanishes into darkness. A muffled explosion thuds against one pier. The bridge trembles. Dust drifts from its joints, but the charge is too small, the placement imperfect. The concrete blackens but does not fracture. By 03:00, the river is empty again. Above, American engineers continue reinforcing the span, unaware how close destruction came. Steel plates are bolted over weakened sections. Timber braces are wedged tighter into gaps left by artillery strikes. Every repair feels temporary. Every vibration travels through the structure like a warning. At dawn, German artillery resumes. Heavy shells arc toward the valley with grim precision. One round slams into the eastern tower, cracking masonry and sending fragments into nearby foxholes. Another lands directly on the bridge deck, tearing open a section already weakened by previous hits. A truck attempting to cross lurches violently as its front wheels drop into the hole. Engineers and infantry rush forward, hauling the vehicle free before the decking gives way entirely. Still, the flow continues. American units expand the bridgehead steadily, pushing outward toward Linz am Rhein. Sherman tanks grind through narrow streets, their hulls brushing against shattered storefronts. German resistance stiffens in pockets but lacks cohesion. The shock of the failed demolition still lingers like disbelief. By afternoon, reports reach German high command of yet another attempt planned to bring down the bridge. This time rockets, V-2 ballistic missiles, the terror weapons that have struck London and Antwerp, are ordered to target Remagen. It is a desperate measure. The rockets lack precision, but desperation is all that remains. That evening, distant thunder rolls from high altitude. A V-2 descends at supersonic speed, slamming into the valley several hundred yards from the bridge. The explosion carves a crater into the hillside, shaking windows miles away. But the bridge stands untouched. A second rocket misses even wider. The Americans stare at the smoking impact sites with disbelief. Germany's most advanced weapon has been unleashed, and it too has failed. Night falls again over the Rhine. Fires burn in Erpel where artillery has struck. The Ludendorff Bridge creaks in the cold wind, its structure warped and scarred, yet defiant against gravity and war alike. Across it now roll entire battalions, supply trucks, ambulances, field guns. Each crossing deepens the Allied foothold. Each hour alive pushes the front line deeper into the Reich. German commanders know the truth. If the bridge survives much longer, the Rhine ceases to be a barrier. It becomes a highway. And somewhere within the steel bones of the span, fractures continue to spread unseen. The bridge has survived bombs, shells, divers, and rockets. But steel has limits, and time is running out. 10 March 1945, 11:47 hours. Ludendorff Bridge, Remagen. The bridge groans before anyone hears the crack. Traffic has become relentless. Sherman tanks from the 14th Tank Battalion crawl east in tight intervals, their tracks grinding over patched planks and twisted steel. 6x6 cargo trucks follow, loaded with ammunition crates, rations, and fuel drums. Ambulances move west, canvas flaps stained dark, carrying the cost of every yard gained beyond the river. Below, the Rhine surges cold and indifferent. Engineers from the 9th Armored Engineer Battalion work continuously along the span. Some kneel over hairline fractures in the trusses, measuring stress with practiced eyes. Others hammer reinforcement beams into place, their tools ringing against metal that vibrates under load. The structure is no longer merely damaged. It is fatigued. At 12:05, a deep metallic report echoes from midspan. Heads turn. A vertical support along the southern truss has shifted. Rivets pop loose with sharp gunshot snaps. The deck dips a fraction of an inch. Enough for men to feel it. Enough for doubt to ripple outward like a shockwave. Traffic halts instantly. Military police wave vehicles back, creating breathing room along the span. Engineers scramble toward the affected section, crawling over beams that hum beneath their weight. One lieutenant presses his ear against a steel member, listening to the faint groan of stress traveling through the frame. The bridge has carried more than it was ever designed to bear. Originally built for rail traffic, its tolerances assumed evenly distributed locomotive weight, not the uneven pressure of armored columns accelerating across patched decking. Every artillery hit, every near miss, has altered its geometry. General William Hogue receives the report with a tightened jaw. The order is immediate. Limit crossings to essential units. Expedite construction of pontoon bridges downstream. The Ludendorff must be preserved as long as possible, but reliance on it alone is no longer acceptable. On the eastern bank, infantry continue pushing outward. The bridgehead now extends several miles into German territory. Artillery pieces are hauled into position, their barrels angled east toward retreating Wehrmacht formations. The presence of heavy guns on that side of the Rhine changes the operational calculus entirely. Yet all of it depends on this span. At 14:30, German artillery resumes, perhaps sensing vulnerability. A high explosive shell detonates near the western tower, showering debris onto the roadway. Another round lands short, erupting in the river and sending a column of water high enough to drench engineers. Mid-repair, the bridge shudders again, louder this time. A crack propagates along a critical lower chord, invisible to most but catastrophic in implication. One engineer traces it with trembling fingers, calculating load distribution in his head. He knows what happens if that chord fails completely. Progressive collapse, one section pulling another down into the current. Despite the risk, controlled crossings resume at reduced intervals. Tanks move one at a time. Trucks are spaced widely. Infantry cross in smaller groups, boots striking softly as if quieter steps might reduce strain. By evening, pontoon construction accelerates. Inflatable sections are lashed together under covering fire. The current fights every cable. Boats ferry additional engineer teams across to secure anchoring points. The temporary spans will not replace the Ludendorff's capacity, but they will ensure continuity if the inevitable occurs. Inside the eastern anchorage tunnel, American command staff study maps illuminated by dim lantern light. The offensive is advancing faster than expected. Entire German units are surrendering west of the Ruhr. The psychological shock of the intact bridge has compounded every other pressure facing the Reich. Outside, the bridge emits another long metallic groan. Men pause mid-step. Some glance upward instinctively, as if they might see failure before it happens. But collapse rarely announces itself clearly. It begins quietly, internally. At 23:10, under cold starlight, a convoy of supply trucks inches across. Halfway over, a sudden lurch runs through the span like a living convulsion. A loud report splits the night as another support member fractures. The deck drops several inches, then holds. Shouts erupt. Vehicles freeze in place. Engineers sprint forward, guiding drivers back one by one, reducing load as quickly as possible. Miraculously, the structure stabilizes, but only barely. The Ludendorff Bridge has endured artillery, bombs, rockets, and sabotage. Now it faces a quieter enemy, exhaustion. Steel does not feel fear. It simply obeys physics. And physics has begun to speak. 17th of March, 1945, 15 hours, Ludendorff Bridge, Remagen. The day is deceptively calm. Pontoon bridges now stretch across the Rhine downstream, their floating spans carrying steady columns of men and armor into the expanding bridgehead. The original crossing still stands, though barely. For 10 days it has defied destruction and gravity alike, enabling 5 U.S. divisions to cross into the heart of Germany. Its steel is warped, its piers cracked, its decking patched so many times it resembles a scarred battlefield in miniature. Engineers continue controlled inspections. Only limited personnel are allowed on the structure now. No heavy armor, no convoys. The bridge has done its work. At 14:58, a low vibration pulses through the southern truss. An engineer looks up sharply. He has felt that resonance before. It is deeper this time, sustained. At 15 knocks precisely, a sharp metallic snap cuts through the air. Then another. Rivets shear in rapid succession, a staccato chain of failures racing along the lower cord. The sound is unmistakable. Structural rupture. Clear the bridge! Men sprint toward both banks, boots pounding against planks that suddenly tilt beneath them. The central span sags visibly, bending like a bow drawn too far. Steel members twist out of alignment, their connections tearing free under cumulative stress. For a suspended heartbeat, the entire structure seems to hesitate. Then gravity takes command. The southern truss collapses first, dragging the roadway downward in a violent arc. The northern truss follows half a second later, snapping with a roar that echoes across the valley. The midspan breaks free from its piers and plunges into the Rhine in a storm of shattered steel and concrete. Water erupts skyward as thousands of tons of metal slam into the current. Dust and steam engulf the riverbank. When the haze clears, the Ludendorff Bridge is no longer a bridge. It is a mangled skeleton jutting from broken piers, its center swallowed by the river it once spanned. Several American engineers who had been conducting inspections are thrown into the water. Rescue boats launch immediately from the western bank. Ropes are cast into the churning current. Some men are pulled out, coughing and bleeding. Others vanish beneath twisted debris and freezing water. The cost is counted quickly. 28 American soldiers dead, dozens injured. Not from enemy fire, but from structural exhaustion finally reaching its limit. Across the valley, German observers witness the collapse through field glasses. There is no celebration. They know the truth. The bridge stood long enough. The damage has already been done. By the time it falls, over 25,000 American troops, along with tanks, artillery, and supplies, have crossed the Rhine at Remagen. The bridgehead is secure. Pontoon spans carry uninterrupted traffic. The collapse, dramatic as it is, changes nothing operationally. On the eastern bank, infantry pause briefly to watch the plume of smoke rising from the river. Some remove helmets. Others simply stare in silence. For 10 days, that structure has been their lifeline, their gamble, their defiance against expectation. Now it is gone. General William Hogue receives confirmation within minutes. His reaction is measured. The objective was never the preservation of steel. It was penetration beyond the Rhine. That objective has been achieved beyond anticipation. German command, meanwhile, confronts consequences. Adolf Hitler orders courts-martial for officers deemed responsible for failing to destroy the bridge earlier. Several are executed. Blame is assigned in a system already collapsing under its own delusion. Yet the larger truth cannot be punished. The Rhine has been crossed. The psychological barrier that had anchored German defensive planning has dissolved. Allied forces pour eastward from multiple crossings, linking with advances from the south and north. The Ruhr industrial region is now exposed, its encirclement only weeks away. As evening settles over Remagen, fragments of the Ludendorff Bridge remain visible above the current, twisted and half-submerged. The towers still stand on either bank, hollow and scorched, like sentinels guarding a vanished path. The river flows around the wreckage without pause. What was meant to be the Reich's final shield became the breach that accelerated its end, not because it was indestructible, not because it survived forever, but because it survived long enough, and in war sometimes long enough is all that matters. 18 March 1945, 06:10 hours. East of the Rhine, beyond Remagen, morning mist rolls low across the fields, thin and gray, barely concealing the movement beneath it. Columns of American infantry advance along muddy farm roads, helmets dark with dew, rifles angled forward. The Ludendorff Bridge is gone behind them, but its absence no longer matters. The crossing it enabled is alive and expanding. Pontoon bridges downstream carry a steady procession of armor and artillery. Sherman tanks grind east in staggered formation, their engines rumbling across floating spans anchored against the Rhine's current. Engineers monitor cable tension constantly, adjusting for strain as vehicles pass. The temporary crossings flex under weight, but they hold. On the eastern bank, the bridgehead now stretches miles deep. Units from the 9th Armored Division link with elements of the 78th Infantry Division, consolidating positions along ridgelines that overlook narrow German villages. Resistance remains scattered. Some Wehrmacht units fight hard from stone farmhouses and church towers. Others surrender at first contact. Their faces hollow, uniforms muddied and worn thin. You can sense the shift. This is no longer a desperate gamble across a trembling span. It is a sustained offensive inside Germany itself. By midday, American artillery batteries are fully emplaced east of the river. 105mm howitzers and 155mm long toms fire methodically toward retreating German formations attempting to regroup. Beyond the Sieg River, shells arc overhead in disciplined cadence, landing with dull thunder across wooded hills. The sound rolls back across the countryside in heavy waves. German command attempts counterattacks where possible. Small armored detachments probe the expanding perimeter, supported by remaining Panther and Panzer IV tanks. In several engagements, Shermans trade fire at close range across open fields. Smoke columns rise where vehicles burn, black against pale sky. Yet the German attacks lack coordination. Communications are fractured. Fuel is scarce. Field Marshal Walter Model understands the strategic danger. The Rhine was meant to buy time, to anchor a defensive line capable of slowing Allied momentum. Its breach at Remagen has fractured that line irreparably. By 20 March, American forces push toward the outskirts of Bonn-tier bridges and road junctions, fall in rapid succession. Engineers move quickly behind advancing units, clearing mines and repairing demolished culverts. Supply convoys follow, uninterrupted. The psychological shock reverberates beyond the battlefield. Civilian populations in towns east of the Rhine begin to realize that the war has reached them fully. Some hang white cloth from windows, others hide in cellars as armored columns pass. Tracks grinding against cobblestones that once carried only bicycles and carts. In Berlin, fury replaces disbelief. Orders are issued demanding resistance to the last man. Courts-martial continue for officers blamed in the Remagen failure. Executions follow swiftly. Yet punishment cannot rebuild a bridge or reverse 10 days of opportunity seized. On 25 March, Allied forces from the north and south coordinate crossings of the Rhine at additional points, including near Wessel during Operation Plunder. Massive airborne drops accompany those assaults. But Remagen remains the catalyst. The first fracture that proved the barrier was penetrable. Within 2 weeks of the bridge's capture, the Ruhr industrial region is encircled. Hundreds of thousands of German troops are trapped in what becomes the Ruhr pocket. The collapse of organized resistance accelerates sharply. Entire formations surrender en masse, rather than face annihilation. American soldiers who crossed at Remagen advance deeper each day, often reflecting quietly on the moment they ran across trembling steel under fire. They speak of the sound the bridge made beneath their boots, the way the river seemed close enough to swallow them whole. Many do not yet grasp the full scale of what that sprint accomplished. Strategists do. The Rhine was not merely a river. It was a symbol, a psychological frontier embedded in European history. When Allied forces established and expanded a bridgehead at Remagen, that symbol cracked. The breach widened with every mile gained beyond it. By early April, the war in the West is effectively decided. German industry is crippled. Supply lines are severed. Armored divisions lack fuel and cohesion. The Eastern Front presses from the opposite direction. As Soviet forces close in on Berlin, the collapse is no longer hypothetical. It is unfolding, and it began with a bridge the Germans believed was already destroyed. Verse April 1945, Western Germany. The Rhine is now firmly behind the advancing Allied armies. What had once been a final defensive barrier is reduced to a line on a map, already receding into memory. The breakthrough at Remagen has merged seamlessly with larger offensives, unfolding across the Western Front. Momentum replaces hesitation. Pressure replaces pause. In the Ruhr, the encirclement tightens daily. American forces, advancing from the Remagen bridgehead link with units pushing south from crossings near Wesel, the industrial heart of Germany, once shielded by rivers and fortified lines, becomes a trapped basin of smoke and collapsing resistance. Rail yards lie twisted. Factories burn under sustained bombardment. German formations inside the pocket attempt breakout operations, but lack coordination and fuel. Columns of weary soldiers move along secondary roads, only to encounter armored roadblocks and artillery fire. Each failed attempt shrinks their remaining perimeter. Field Marshal Walter Model commands the trapped forces. He understands the reality with cold clarity. Supplies cannot be replenished. Air support is negligible. Communications are fragmented. The strategic initiative is gone. On 14th April, organized resistance in the Ruhr effectively ends. More than 300,000. German troops are captured in one of the largest mass surrenders of the war in Europe. The collapse reverberates through every remaining German command structure. Entire defensive plans disintegrate overnight. East of the Rhine, American columns press onward with increasing speed. Armored divisions bypass strong points when possible, isolating pockets of resistance rather than grinding through them. Town after town falls in rapid succession. Some see brief firefights, others surrender without a shot. Civilians emerge cautiously from basements, faces pale, expressions uncertain. White flags hang from balconies and church towers. The sound of artillery grows more distant with each passing day, replaced by the rumble of engines moving ever deeper into the Reich. In Berlin, the atmosphere hardens into fatalism. Adolf Hitler issues orders demanding total resistance, yet his directives carry diminishing force. Commanders on the ground confront immediate realities rather than distant proclamations. By mid-April, Allied forces advancing from the west approach the Elbe River. Soviet armies advancing from the east close toward Berlin itself. Germany is being compressed from both directions. The men who crossed at Remagen now operate dozens of miles beyond the river. For many, the memory of the Ludendorff Bridge feels distant, almost surreal, yet its impact is measurable in every mile gained since. The unexpected crossing accelerated operational timelines, fractured defensive cohesion, and forced German command into reactive desperation. On 25 April, American and Soviet forces linked near Torgau on the Elbe. The symbolic handshake between East and West confirms what has already become evident. The Reich is cut in two. Berlin stands isolated. Combat continues in scattered pockets, but the trajectory is irreversible. On 30th April 1945, Adolf Hitler dies in Berlin as Soviet troops close in around the Reich Chancellery. Within days, remaining German authorities seek terms. On 7 May 1945, representatives of the German High Command sign an unconditional surrender at Reims, France. The war in Europe ends formally on 8 May, celebrated as Victory in Europe Day. The Rhine flows quietly through Remagen once more. The wreckage of the Ludendorff Bridge remains partially visible for months, twisted steel rising above the current, as a stark reminder of 10 extraordinary days in March. Eventually, salvage operations remove most of the debris. The towers on either bank remain standing, hollow sentinels marking the site, where a gamble altered the tempo of a continent-wide war. Historians later debate the precise weight of Remagen in the broader campaign. Some argue the German collapse was inevitable given overwhelming Allied superiority in manpower, industry, and air power. Others point to the psychological rupture that occurred the moment American troops realized the bridge still stood and chose to run rather than hesitate. Both assessments contain truth. Strategic victory rarely hinges on a single structure. Yet timing, surprise, and audacity can compress months of grinding attrition into days of decisive momentum. The Ludendorff Bridge did not win the war alone, but it accelerated its end at a critical juncture, transforming a fortified boundary into an open gateway. In war, opportunities are fleeting. Steel fails, plans unravel, rivers continue to flow. But sometimes, for a brief and unlikely span of days, a bridge holds.